Mark Halperin. Time to turn to story number 5 in our countdown: COVID lockouts at America's public schools. Now, we've got parents getting increasingly frustrated with schools that remain shut down. This comes as the CDC's director says vaccinating teachers isn't needed for them to get back into the classroom, but that's not stopping teachers' unions from refusing to listen. And it's not just impacting our kids' education, it's also having a drastic impact on America's economy. Joining us now to discuss is North Carolina Congressman Dan Bishop. Congressman, thank you so much for joining us. And when I have this talk about getting these schools back open, we know for a fact the data is in. Schools are some of the safest places to be right now. Transmission rates, some of the lowest of any of the places, whether you're talking about restaurants, public transportation, and alike. How do we get this stranglehold that the unions have over our federal process of getting our children back to school to break?
Well, Joe, I think Democratic lawmakers are going to have to do something other than pay lip service to the idea of returning to school. So you see a lot of folks talking about, enormous appropriations of additional money for schools. It's fine to take care of the problems that schools may have getting back from COVID, but what the CDC has said is that it's safe to do so. And the money that's been appropriated previously for schools has not been spent. The current reconciliation bill that's out there would appropriate about another $130 billion, but only 5% of that would be spent by September of this year.
Correct.
The answer is that they really don't want to get kids back in school because the unions oppose it. And so that's what, they've just got to get on with the program, and they're going to have to step forward and make it happen.
I'm glad you brought that up, because you look at the urgent need to get children back into the classroom, and obviously we want to make sure that those classrooms are as safe as humanly possible, not just for the teachers, but also for those children that we love. But $6 billion for the first year, $32 billion for a second year, $32 billion again for a third year. And the question remains, what does money for your school board through 2 years from now have to do with making sure that children are safe and can get back in the classroom today?
Exactly, Joe. It has nothing to do with it at all. We're talking about the pandemic, responding to the pandemic. Kids have been out of school for a year. And we just don't need to, it's got nothing to do with it. And that's been a pattern in terms of Democratic proposals for COVID, is they want to take care of states that have not managed their money well, other fiscal problems they've created over time, and they delay and delay and delay getting kids back in school in order to fight about or argue about, bicker about other things.
Now, Congressman, I want to bring my colleague Mark Halperin in to join this conversation, because, Mark, when we sit here and look at what's transpiring, you have this COVID bill chock full of what seems to be pork. How do we get that under control right now to make sure we're focusing on the core essentials, getting vaccines into the arms of people, but also, more importantly, as we're talking about right now, getting children into a place where they can start to learn again, and we can begin to close this educational long tail that's going to be plaguing America for decades to come?
Well, in terms of the spending bill, I think the congressman's going to be a bystander, like most Republicans are in Congress right now, because of the process the Democrats are using. I think the teachers' unions are the key. I agree with what's been said. Congressman, jawboning doesn't seem like it's going to work. The teachers' unions aren't going to listen. What can be done by governors and maybe by the president to try to get teachers' unions to put the kids first?
Well, Mark, I think what we need to do is communicate. Because one of the things that's been clear to me over the last several months dealing with constituents and following events in the country is that parents are really fed up. So we need to amplify their voices. And one of the ideas is something that I've proposed. I've offered a piece of legislation called the Choice Act that would make federal funds, some of COVID relief funds, 10% of all COVID relief funds that go to K-12 would be made available for parents. If they're in a situation where their kid cannot go to in-person school, they can make alternative choices. They could go to a religious school, a private school, they could do homeschooling, and the funds would be made available through opportunity grants to pay for those. So I think proposals like that, communicating the absolute need to get kids back in school and making sure that folks know that parents are insisting on that, that's our role right now.
Now, Congressman, you're dealing right now in Congress the smallest majority since World War II. As much as people say the Democrats are running roughshod, you've got an equally divided Senate. To your point about school choice, in his last State of the Union, President Trump saying that we would fight for school choice for every American family. Do you think that perhaps, as much as it might seem like it, this is the moment to put something like that before the American people and see if you can get some Democrats to hop on board in those districts where we know that this polls extremely well?
I definitely think so, Joe. The idea of educational choice is an 80% issue. Everyone agrees that parents should have choice for their children's education to do what's best for their child. Everyone agrees that the money should follow the child. And so this brings it to a sort of to a specific point, to a point where action seems inevitable to me, and it's the right time to be talking about this issue. Some have said, and I agree, that choice in education is the civil rights issue of the 21st century, and I think COVID has added a punctuation point to it. Now's the time. Let's get it done now.
All right, Congressman Dan Bishop, God bless you. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, sir, and Godspeed.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Mark. Good to be with you.
All right, we continue with story number